So the official Smash tier list came out a little while ago, and by official, I mean official. I mean all sorts of top players contributing to the making of one list, and it also shows up in the Smash Wiki as the first official Smash Bros. Ultimate tier list. It's pretty interesting. Whether you believe in tier lists or not, at the end of the day, it's players who fight with the characters placed in S and S plus tiers that show up the most in big tournaments, and therefore are characters that you'll see a lot if you're trying to go pro, or at least if you want to get your main into Elite Smash. Steve is character number 1 on the tier list, which is pretty silly. I think if there's someone who's gonna be broken enough to be banned in most Smash tournaments, it's so funny for it to be Steve. Not too long ago, we were certain Steve wouldn't make it to Smash, or at least I was, and the fact that he got in and established himself as the undisputed best character in the game, I love that. I mean, he was banned because of the dumb tech that was discovered not too long ago, something that is essentially a glitch, and it lets him get out of combos and even punish you for landing them. But even if that wasn't a thing, or if Nintendo decided to patch it out, he'd still be the best. Okay, so getting into how to beat him, it's actually pretty difficult. In fact, it should come as no surprise to most of you, but these guys don't have a lot of weaknesses. That's why they're in the top. So keep in mind that me telling you how to play to Steve's weaknesses won't mean you'll automatically beat him, because he's pretty good. He's pretty good. Steve is really good at getting on your nerves. This tip is important when fighting anyone, especially the top tiers, but getting impatient against Steve gives him a pretty huge advantage because of his insane punish game. For example, if you see the man wall himself out and start mining materials, which is something that will happen a lot, especially in the early game, your first instinct may be to, well, stop him from mining, because Steve needs those materials, which means you need to stop Steve from getting his materials. And don't get me wrong, that is what you should do, but any decent Steve player knows that you want to stop him from mining as soon as possible, and rushing into him or jumping over the wall or destroying blocks aimlessly won't always work out the way you want it to. So again, this is more of a fundamental tip, but keep your cool. Steve has a lot of traps he can set up while in his advantage state, and he thrives on people rushing in. Break the blocks or jump over the wall if you want to, but keep in mind, he knows. He knows that that's what you'll want to do. Be patient and pay attention to how he reacts when you go for the approach. Ideally, you beat him out by slowly letting him use up all of his materials and not giving him enough time to get them back. Especially his iron. You might know this already, you might not, but Steve is a significantly worse character when he has no iron. He loses access to minecart and his down air, 2 very useful burst options, and just moves in general that he'll really struggle to play without. Finally, and I'll mention this again in more detail later, but there will be times where you just have to let Steve mine. Sometimes he will just have that opening. You can't keep him from mining forever, so don't get too upset when you see this. It happens. Steve is really good at keeping you out. It's one of the reasons he's the best in the game. Just accept it, relax, and focus on using these tips to the best of your abilities.
He didn't have any iron left.
Yeah.
And because of that, his recovery started to get leaner. So panic options,
that's right,
decided to go for the double jump, and this is where Mutates caught him. So perfectly well done, and how Mutates managed to keep his calm.
A pretty noticeable weakness Steve has is playing mid-range. He's pretty amazing at camping people out, and his close range options are, well, top tier. But they're also stubby, and spacing him right outside of his burst range will mean that he can really only hit you with his campy moves, and these are easier to punish. If you have an aerial that can stop minecart, learn it, just don't get predictable. And if he runs off in mines, which will happen, because playing mid-range will also exhaust his materials, it will put you in a guessing game. So he retreated to mine, and he probably won't place a lot of walls, if any, because he needs to conserve his materials, and he also needs to do it really quickly because you're still close to him. He's scared, and he already sees you as someone who isn't gonna give him enough space to mine too much, and that's where you have your opening. Mining is surprisingly laggy and punishable, so pay attention. What does he do when he sees you approaching? Does he shield, or roll away, jump, grab, minecart, or whatever? Win interactions in mid-range, easier said than done, I know, and when he has to mine, pay attention to his habits and punish them. Check out his materials bar, it might clue you in on when he's gonna retreat or what he's gonna do when you try to punish the mining. For example, if he was able to mine a little iron, minecart is a pretty great option for him when you approach. Still, there are a bunch of things he can do without the need for materials, and they can be tricky to deal with. But again, he's still at a pretty big disadvantage when he's desperate to mine.
He has no materials left, so he can do anything while Mutates is in his face. He can't mine, so he can't put any walls.
He knows that too, and he is scared out of his mind as he should be. Mutates taking full advantage right here of the opportunity.
No, don't let him mine!
But in the end, you're not gonna win every interaction. Smash is a game about learning and adapting, and while you can adapt, so can Steve. Playing mid-range is a good strategy, but it doesn't hand you the win, and it doesn't mean he won't hit you with anything eventually, even if you don't lay your guard down. Steve is is really good at camping, and like I mentioned before, he has a crazy punish game. So if he catches on to what you're doing and ends up hitting you away and he starts camping, you really have no choice but to let him get a bunch of materials back and let him get stage control while you land and get ready to approach again. That or he combos you, in which case DI up away on ladder combos, and for the jab to forwarder loops you can DI them out or in to escape. Just mix it up, because once he knows what option you're choosing, it's not too hard for him to follow your DI and keep the combo going. In conclusion, don't give him space, but also be careful with his burst range. Punish the minecart if you have an aerial that can, or dodge it. And while ideally you should be watching all sorts of habits like what he does at ledge or when he's put in a tech situation or whatever, focus on what he does when you approach him while he's mining. Before I move on, the video I used a lot for this part was a set with Mute Ace against Akola. Mute was Peach and he was really good at catching the minecarts, not letting Steve mine too much and approaching him while he was camping. So go check that out if you want to see more examples of all the stuff I just said. It's important to know what your character can do against him. What is the fastest and safest way for your main to break blocks? Which moves can stuff out minecart? Steve has a lot of cheese going for him, and while sometimes you're better off trying to counter it, like the blocks and sometimes the minecart if you can react to it or predict it, sometimes you should really just respect it, like his downer or minecart when it's using powered rails, aka when he has gold and redstone. Powered minecart is so strong, it's ridiculous. Many would say it's his best move, and because playing mid-range isn't always easy and not everyone can do it, at least not efficiently, there will be times where Steve does manage to mine a lot of materials. I mentioned this before, but relax. Remember what he did to punish your approach and pick up on his habits. Steve has to play defensively a lot, and because of that, it's very easy for them to pick up a bad habit, because if you're playing to his weaknesses and you're not giving him enough room to think, he won't always be thinking like, wait, I rolled last time. He struggles against rushdown fighters who give him a harder time camping, bonus points if they can outspace him. As for his best and worst stages, going into detail with it would pretty much double the length of this video, but Mewtwo made a video about this going into more detail, and in a nutshell this depends a lot on what he gains from mining in each stage. Lilat gives him more iron, so avoid that. Final Destination, Small Battlefield, and Battlefield all give him the same results while mining, gold on the 18th material and diamond on the 30th. Smashville and Town and City give him diamonds a tiny bit sooner on the 28th dig, which by the way resets if he gets KO'd. Pokemon Stadium gives him stone on your first dig and iron on your second, letting Steve craft stone or iron tools right away, but at the risk of leaving him without any iron for his other moves. Yoshi's Story lets Steve dig faster and he uses his shovel, which is great for him because letting it break won't mess with your other moves. And Kalos is similar to Lilat in terms of materials, just more stone and a little less iron. Again, I don't want to go into too much detail because I'm trying to keep this guide compact, but I'll link Mewtwo video on the description if you want to know more about Steve's stages. But to summarize, Lilat, Yoshi's, and Kalos are his best stages in terms of materials. FD, Battlefield, and Small Battlefield are more of a personal preference, but I think it's best to avoid side platforms because those help him camp. But that's just me. I also found someone else say platforms are good because they help you avoid minecart, and other than that I couldn't find anyone argue if platforms are good for Steve or not. So if you know for sure if Steve likes platforms, leave a comment down below because that's as far as I could find out, and I don't want to give you guys information I'm not sure about. So those were more concrete, categorizable tips, but there are a few other little bits of Steve's character that you should remember too if you want to learn the matchup, so here's a little bit of a lightning round. Watch out for the up tilt spam. Don't shield for too much, it's punishable if you have a quick move, but the safest play is to usually just roll out, but like always, don't get repetitive. Don't use a smash attack to destroy blocks, it's laggy, you can get punished for it. Panic cart is a real thing, it's an amazing get off me move. Remember, it's invincible during the first 17 frames, but Steve isn't, and also quick long aerials are usually what people use to stuff it out. Now that you have your answer to minecart, Steve isn't very good at chasing people in the air. If your main is someone who jumps around a lot, he won't like that. And finally, number 5, if you have a long lasting aerial, use it to catch his uppy. It's easy to catch, but Steve's recovery is still pretty good apart from the elytra, so just don't get minecarted instead, because long-lasting moves are often multi-hits and those ones can't stuff out the minecart, so watch his habits in recovery. And that's how you beat Steve. Again, all of this is easier said than done. If you really struggle against a Steve player in your locals, or if you lost 15 times in a row to the Genderman on quick play and you really need to master the matchup, your best solution would be to actually practice what you learn in this video and not think you're all good to go just because you made it to the end. Still, I mean, you did make it to the end, so thanks for that. Before I go, thank you for blowing up my last video about Marth. It got so many views, but I forgot to ask people to subscribe, and here's how that statistic YouTubers love to show ended up looking for me. That last video practically doubled my sub count as of this video's release, so this is me asking you to subscribe this time. Let's see how that goes. It helps me out so much, especially with all the attention I'm getting while my channel is really small. And again, thanks for watching. Also, on the topic of that video, I made a few mistakes on that, so if you want to watch that after this, go ahead and check it out. But also, take a look at the pinned comment with all my corrections. Okay, bye. I still don't know how to outro videos.